been 1 year since we started nomading, and we've gone to many places. Before we started this, we'd really only lived in very few places. Our respective childhood homes,
college,
New York, and then
London.
Yeah, so and London obviously was the gateway to this entire lifestyle. So we just wanted to take this time to really look back on our last year of nomading and figure out, what we experienced. So I suppose we'll just go in order.
Yeah, we started in New York, so it'll always hold a special place.
I remember leaving London and very unsure about how this was going to work out for us. We got rid of all of our stuff, basically, except for some very core possessions. We showed up in York, and trying to find our hotel, we realized that there was construction on 3/4 of the ends, and we ended up having to walk around a park that was closed because it was after dusk. So it was like 2 extra miles than we expected, and I was fuming. I was so mad.
Yeah. Needless to say, it was a little rough, but only for like 10 minutes. Once we showed up and dropped our stuff and went exploring, everything was all good.
Well, because we found out that since we were a longer stay, there was a gate that we could use that they gave us a key to. We weren't stuck there. But yeah, it's things like that. You never know if the place you're staying is going to have some downsides.
York itself was a fantastic experience. We really enjoy being in walled cities.
Yeah, because you just know the history's there. Like coming off the train, you get out and the wall is right there in front of you and you can see it and walk along it if the weather's good. And also walled cities, they have narrower streets, generally a lot more pedestrian-only streets because it's just cars don't fit there, so they just make them pedestrian streets, and we really appreciate that as pedestrians. And in York in particular, there was a lot to do. There was a decent amount of shops there. There were plenty of museums and historical sites that you could go visit. The Viking Museum, which was very cool, with the animatronic models of what people actually looked like. After you went through sort of the interactive bit, they have little histories of the people that you saw, and the smells of what it would have smelled like.
I really enjoyed the ghost tour. That's probably my favorite ghost tour that we've gone on, because it's really all the kind of personality the tour guide has.
And it was just fun because you meet up at a pub to start the tour at 7:30 or 8. Yeah, while we were in New York, we also took some day trips. I enjoyed both of them, but Leeds was very cool.
They were fantastic places despite the weather. So both days actually.
Both days, yeah.
Leeds was crazy windy, and when we went to Sheffield, it was just raining a lot. It's gonna rain.
Yeah.
And you can't let it stop you from doing things.
But it was February, so it was also cold. So I think we had to stop into a pub for a quick pint just to warm ourselves up a bit, which we've actually now done a few times. It's kind of become
it's our winter thing, I guess.
When we get too cold, we just hop in and get a pint to warm up.
It was a great way to start this lifestyle. Our second location was Birmingham. Before we even went to Birmingham, we mentioned that we were going there to a few people and got very lukewarm responses from everybody we spoke to.
Yeah, everyone's like, "Oh, Birmingham, it's there. I don't know, it's whatever."
Yeah, the best response we got from it was a friend of ours had friends who'd gone and would go again.
Yeah, they'd go back. It's definitely more of a city, so coming from York, which is I guess a city, but it's a small kind of reined-in city, to Birmingham, which is the second largest city in the UK, or in England at least. It was a big difference. You're a lot more traffic, noise, that kind of stuff. But we were only a month out from living in London at that point, so it was
Yeah, anything we did this year was much smaller than where we've lived. We're coming from living in London and from New York City, so
yeah,
it's a nice change.
We stayed pretty close to the Bull Ring, so there was a lot of stuff to do and like interesting places to walk around, and we weren't too far from Digbeth.
Yeah, that was probably my favorite neighborhood. A lot of street art, like they're known for the graffiti art scene that started in the 80s. That area also, we learned a new game, which was a lot of fun. It was Pit Pat.
Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's really a popular thing, so that's still the only place we've seen it. But if we find it again, we're definitely doing it because it's mini golf and billiards together. It's so fun. If I ever got into like metalworking or anything, I would consider building some
home projects along with our home gym once we eventually buy a place.
Home gym would definitely come
Home
first.
gym comes first.
Ghetto golf, which was a really fun experience there, which was, it kind of leaned into the street art scene in Digbeth and combined it with mini golf. So it was basically just a big warehouse that had been turned into mini golf with just street art all over the place.
Yeah, it was a good experience. And not in that neighborhood. We also went to a brewery, the comedy show there. And because it's a brewery, it's a very close-knit, interactive kind of comedy show. And there was one lady in the audience who was in love with Sean, pretty much.
She was. I wish we had gotten some of that on camera because she was just like heckling the comedians. And it was so funny. But then like some of her heckling was about me being good looking and like having large arms and stuff, so it was pretty funny. Her husband was like, he was so like dry British humor, like to a T. It was great. He was the perfect great man. He was so funny to her like excessiveness. But yeah, that was Somar Brewing. I would definitely go back there if we're in Birmingham again.
We did our first dog sit of the year after that, like a week with a dog in a small town.
That was actually, I enjoyed that because it was a small market town called Chippenham, and it was the house we were staying at was walking distance to city center. They had a free museum just about the history of Chippenham. There was a nice gym in town, so there wasn't like a ton of experiences, I guess, during those 2 weeks, but it was chill. It was different, and I liked it.
We went to Lisbon on our way to visit probably most of the people watching this video.
We actually picked Lisbon because we were looking at flights to New York, and the cheapest flights to New York hopped through Lisbon. We were like, well, why would we just go to Lisbon for 2 hours on the way to New York? Why don't we like make it a full-on trip? And then it turned out that flights are only cheap when you like fly from London to Lisbon to New York, but like when we did it as full-on legs, it did not come out nearly as cheap. But we were basically committed at that point.
Yeah, no, it was a great experience. I'm glad we still went to Lisbon. We still have to go to Porto. We did this guided walking tour, and apparently there is some sort of competition between Porto and Lisbon.
Also in Lisbon, we basically stayed right inside the castle walls for Castelo São Jorge, which is like the big castle that you can see on the hill in Lisbon. While that was really cool because we were in like the narrow streets and all that stuff, it was very touristy, and obviously it was on top of a hill, so like everywhere we went we were walking up and down hill. So we got our flights very
easily,
no problem
every day.
Yeah. But then the other bit that was cool is they keep peacocks at the castle. By keeping them at the castle, I mean
they just wander around.
I would just see peacocks every day and would hear them all day.
They're so bold too.
But Lisbon was really nice. I will say the gym in Lisbon was probably the worst gym.
Yeah.
It had reasonable amounts of equipment.
It was crowded though.
It was packed at all hours of the day.
We took a couple of really great day trips when we were there. We went to Sintra because there's a Moorish castle there. This is the one time we've ever been told not to do a walk.
Yeah, but this was so the train station gets in in the town itself, and there's like the palace there. So we had seen the palace, but the Moorish castle was up on a hill. It didn't look that bad to like hike it, so I was just checking if there was like a hiking path, and the reviews, first review I read was like, do not walk to the castle, it is steep, you will die. And then the next review was like, delightful walk to the castle. And I went to the visitor information center, and she was like, oh, how fit are you guys? Do you hike? And we're like, oh yeah, we love to hike. And she's like, oh, then it's an amazing walk. And I'm just like, so we did it. It was actually not even that bad.
Yeah.
I think most people could handle it. It was steep, but like you got progressively better views of Sintra as you got up to the castle. So it was a really cool walk. Also, there was rock climbers.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Our second day trip was to Cascais, which was like a beach town. Walked along the coast and we saw the Devil's Mouth, which was actually really cool.
Everywhere you go, there are signs that mention red squirrels.
In the UK.
In the UK.
But they also mention that they're like being pushed out by the gray squirrels from North America.
Yeah, from what we could tell, they have been pushed out because we have not seen any anywhere we've gone in the UK, and we've been several places now.
Too.
But we went to Lisbon and finally saw a red squirrel.
That was really exciting for us. That brings us to Edinburgh.
Well, yeah, we're just going to skip over.
Did New York and London again, between Lisbon and Edinburgh. New York for business and family, and then
London for family and friends.
Family and friends. And then we were free to...
Well, then Tunbridge Wells for another dog sit.
That's true, we did another dog sit.
That brings us to June and our summer of Scotland.
Right, that starts the summer of Scotland. And we went back to Edinburgh, which was the only place on our list that we'd actually been before.
It was actually where we decided to start doing this anyway.
Yeah, when things started to open back up in like September 2021, when the pandemic was sort of ramping down a little, we went to Edinburgh as like a long weekend trip just to remember what it was like to actually go on a vacation. And we really loved it. First of all, like we had a great time, and we really just wanted to do more like that, just like see other places in the UK. And that's when, Laura kind of brought up like, well, our lease is up in January and you don't have to go back to the office really, so why not start doing this all over the UK? I didn't have a good reason not to. In fact, it sounded like a great idea. Yeah, so that's when we started selling all of our stuff off and getting our apartment cleaned out and really figuring out what we needed to travel with and going for it. We knew as soon as we were there that we wanted to be there for longer than 4 days. So we kind of planned that one as going to be a longer stay. And we actually got like a great deal in the apartment there.
Yeah, it is so nice when you can actually find like a short-term let that is not on Airbnb or Booking. Those are what we usually use because they're just easier. You're going to have more options. But when there are other options available, go for it.
Rents in Edinburgh are actually fairly reasonable for like a major city. We went back to Edinburgh for 2 months, which is our longest stay.
We were actually thinking 3 months, but August is not a time you want to try to pay rent in Edinburgh.
The rent tripled for the month of August because we had asked for June through August, and they were like, "Oh, June and July are 1,000, and August is 2,700." And I'm like, June and July it is. It worked out just fine because we still got to do a day of the Fringe Festival, which is why everything got more expensive in August. The apartment we stayed near was right on a canal that we liked to walk along. That was a nice walking path.
The canal was a good walking path. And during the summer, they did a canal fest. So they had like a bunch of artists along the path. Like they had musicians. They had a studio that was open for like a tour, which was pretty cool.
That was cool. They also had houseboat tour, which was really fun.
That was pretty fun.
Yeah, they had the boat races, with the people with the homemade boats. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, they were pretty cool. Some of the designs, I'm like, I'm kind of surprised that floats.
Yeah, seriously. From Edinburgh, we went to Stockholm, which gonna meet friends there.
Unfortunately, the friend part didn't pan out because pandemics suck.
Yeah. But we still went to Stockholm. And this actually, I think, is where a decent amount of our travel budget went to, because flying out of Edinburgh in general was not very cheap. I think it would have been much cheaper for us to go down to London and fly pretty much anywhere.
Stockholm's also just, more expensive than the UK.
Stockholm's pretty expensive. Because it was a week, it was very fast paced. But we bought the city pass, included a bunch of entries, so we didn't even really have to plan too much. We were just like, well, we have this 3-day city pass, and here's the 14 things that it includes. All we did was kind of group them together geographically. This is when we were starting to really do long walks for the West Highland Way training. So we actually rented a place that was like an hour and a half walk from like the center, from the large islands. I think we averaged over 30,000 steps for the 7 days we were in Stockholm, which was pretty awesome. And also I had to buy new shoes while we were there because it was just so bad. But it was cool because we had the city pass, we saw some things that we might not have otherwise gone to that we really enjoyed. Like
toy museum.
The toy museum was really cool because it also had comic books. It had old toys. It was in an old bomb shelter. So it was just really cool, eclectic mix that I definitely don't think we would have even figured out was there. The murder mystery walking tour, we definitely wouldn't have known that was a thing.
Yeah, we actually have to find another one of those because that was a lot of fun.
I think we probably would have gone to Scanston anyway.
So.
That was really cool. It was just a giant outdoor museum where they had relocated a bunch of old buildings to like one location and kept them historically like accurate, and then just a whole bunch of information about them, some paid actors. We did kayaking as well. It was quite a lot of fun. What I liked about Stockholm was, even though it was it's a big city, obviously, there was plenty of green. You were always able to find lots of green space, right? Some of the islands are just big parks, basically, with sculpture trails and things like that.
We saw a deer just run out into the path just a couple feet ahead of us at one point.
Yeah, that was like a mix of awesome and a little bit scary. And it was just clean, environmentally conscious. Like there was recycling everywhere. A lot of the packaging was meant to be recycled. I enjoyed Stockholm a lot, aside from how expensive it was.
And when we came back, we did the day back in Edinburgh for
the Fringe Festival, which
was a lot of fun.
That was a very fun experience. I'm glad we did a day there. I'm glad we also didn't do the month there because it was packed.
Big festival. I enjoy the idea of being there more than I enjoy the actual being there because of the crowds.
So then we went to Aberdeen from Edinburgh, which was like a pretty easy journey. And Aberdeen is right along the coast. It was formerly very known for oil production. So you can look it out and see the old, like where the oil rigs were. So like a lot of the signs are like Aberdeen, Europe, oil capital. And then a bunch of them now say energy capital, because actually they've put in a lot of offshore windmills instead of oil rigs now. So it's kind of nice. And we actually went to the Maritime Museum that talked about all this stuff.
Walking along the coast is always nice. I always really enjoy that. We did have one really adventurous one where we just kind of walked that what we thought was a path, and then suddenly it was just like this tiny little strip of land, cliff.
Yeah, and then we ended up being like sandwiched between like a fence and a drop off, and it just got narrower and narrower until eventually Laura was like, "Sean, you gotta stop going forward. This is not the path." And I was like, "Yeah, you're probably right." And we had to turn back, and on the way back, I was just looking. I was like, "How did I go this far without turning around? Like, this is dumb." You could go on really long coastal walks because it's just along the coast, and that they mostly uninterrupted.
Yeah, and
if you know where the path is.
Even if you're not like right on the coast, they also have a couple of really nice river walks. So anywhere you walk, you could probably be walking along a nice body of water.
It's the River Dee and the River
Don.
Yeah. But yeah, so we did a lot of walking when we were in Aberdeen, actually, because that's when we were really pushed before the West Highland Way and making sure we could, actually get multiple days of 40,000 plus step days.
And we did.
We did. I think the downsides of Aberdeen, the internet there was terrible in the city center. It looked like from the advertising, you get gigabit internet just outside of city center, but in city center,
they hadn't put it in yet.
DSL still.
Yeah, but they were switching to broadband. Like, it might exist now.
It might.
After Aberdeen, we finally did the West Highland Way, which we had been looking forward to since
we first heard about it.
The first time we went to Edinburgh, actually. We did like a bus trip.
Pretty much a year, almost exactly a year earlier, we had heard about the West Highland Way, and we were like, wow, we should do that. And we finally did. And it was a lot of prep. I mean, obviously, making sure we could do the walks, but in terms of like finding the right equipment to have, arranging our baggage transfer, because like we weren't going to carry our suitcases.
Arranging everywhere we were staying, because, it's one night in a bunch of different places.
We just like kind of gave our suitcases to these dudes with a van. We just like hoped that it was all legit.
I mean, it worked out. We got our stuff back.
We did get our stuff. We had to pay an extra £5.
It wasn't the most professional ending. Let's just put it at that.
Yeah. But I will say the walk was amazing in terms of the landscapes.
Absolutely gorgeous. It's really fascinating to see how much the earth changes in 96 miles.
Yeah, like one day you'll be going, over mountains, then you'll be going along a lake, and then you'll be going along nothing. It was really cool. And it was also interesting because I kind of just assumed that there would be more stores, because it's still the UK. It's not
you pass through town still.
But it was pretty slim pickings. Like, for the number of people that go through there, you'd think they would have... I kind of assumed just because of the tonnage of people that walk through, there would be more shops just for food and hiking stuff. And those existed, but only in the sort of larger towns. Otherwise, you basically had just like these tiny little bodega type places every 20 miles or so. So like you got your one per day if you were lucky. I think there was one day that there was nothing.
The day there was nothing was kind of because of timing. So like there was one that we had heard of, and we just got to that area an hour too early.
Yeah, it was like, we don't open the kitchen for 45 minutes, so you can have a beer while you wait. And we're like, well, we can't wait because we have 18 more miles to walk today. So I think that was the day we woke up too early for breakfast. We got to the next town too early for lunch. The next town we got there too late for lunch.
We got there too late for food.
So they only had like cake. So we basically had to hoof it through to dinner, just eating like
road snacks.
That was not my favorite day, but that was also the day that it like poured on us and was...
It was our longest day.
That was the toughest day.
It was the toughest day.
Actually, it might be related to the fact that we didn't really eat food.
Probably did.
What we really liked about it as well was a couple of places we stayed were in like glamping pods. So they had like cots for beds, and like a space heater. They'd have one outlet or something, so you could charge phones. But other than that, that's it. You had your space heater, your 2 cots, and an outlet, and it was all you really needed, right, for a comfortable night's sleep. That's when we started talking like, this could be an interesting thing. Like if we lived somewhere along like the Appalachian Trail or something like that. Just setting a couple of those up in your backyard, having shower, kitchen facilities or something like that available to people. Kind of a fun little side business.
Yeah, it's something we have in the back of our minds for later.
Aside from the couple rainy days at the beginning, which definitely sucked.
Yeah, but we got pretty lucky with weather considering.
Right, but I think we basically had wet shoes for the first 3 days because it rained the first two, sprinkled a little on the third, not too bad, but it was still a lot of puddles. But then it got nice, and my feet were already completely messed up by that from just walking in wet socks, but it was nice to be dry.
And we're lumping this in with the West Highland Way. We hiked Ben Nevis. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. We hadn't climbed a mountain in a while because
it's the tallest peak in the UK, and we did it the day after we finished the West Highland Way. It was only 14 miles the last day
instead of the 20 or 21 that we'd done every other day.
Right, so shorter day, so we didn't do as much damage, and then we had almost 18 hours to recover before climbing the mountain, so it was pretty solid. We also met up with a hiker, kind of just some guy who happened to match pace with us for a short period of time. We just talked to him the whole way up, and then it turns out he didn't really match pace with us.
He just slowed
way
down
faster than us. He just slowed way down to talk to us. But it was a very fun experience, climbing that. And now we need to do the other tall peaks in the different countries. So that was the tallest in the UK, and also the tallest in Scotland, because that's how that works.
We still have to do it with the other 3 countries.
Yeah, so Mount Snowdon is the tallest in Wales. Scaffold's Pike is the one in England.
In Northern Ireland, it's Slieve Donard.
If we're lucky, we'll get to do all of those before we leave here. I actually spent a week in Fort William at the end of the trail, which was...
It was mostly a recovery week, so we were working.
Yeah, I just sat down with my laptop, didn't have to walk a ton, let my feet sort of heal. And then we had crazy travel back down to southern Wales.
See, this is one of the things that we're working on for next year we're going into. We didn't look at where things were before we chose places, or we hadn't even booked our transportation yet. So 3 days before we were supposed to leave, we were like, okay, we really have to book our transportation to our next place. Shortest way there, 14 hours, 3 transfers.
Overnight.
Yeah,
so we left at 5 p.m., got to Cardiff at 9 in the morning. It was what it was.
Yes, I don't especially want to repeat that kind of travel day, which is something to work on for 2023.
Definitely.
Cardiff was a lot of fun. We had a couple firsts in Cardiff, other than just the first time being there. Also had never gone to a rugby derby, and that was a lot of fun. And we also saw an opera because La Boheme was there, and I really enjoyed Rent, so I was kind of excited to see what it was actually based off of.
Yeah, so it was all in Italian, obviously, but they had the subtitles in both Welsh and in English, so that was pretty cool. I found out that opera's maybe not my thing, or maybe not that one, maybe something a little more upbeat.
Most operas are not upbeat.
There's gotta be some good operas that are
We'll have to do some research.
A rugby derby, which was really cool. We tried to look up a bunch of the rules and learn it a little bit before going, but it was fairly fast-paced, so I kind of got confused sometimes.
But, we'll have to go to a football match next.
Yeah. The other thing about Cardiff is there was a lot of Doctor Who references. That was pretty cool because I guess a decent amount of the new rebooted Doctor Who has been filmed in Cardiff.
There used to be a Doctor Who interactive thing there, but it closed a few months before we were there.
Yeah.
The thing about Cardiff, Roald Dahl was apparently born there, so they have a bunch of places named after him.
Yeah, and we saw the church he was baptized in, and we saw the school he went to.
Mm-hmm. And the house that he was born in.
Right, there's a lot of plaques, but Roald Dahl. So that was pretty cool. Just a bunch of castles. Wales is covered in those things.
Yeah. So we walked to, 3 or 4 just in a day or 2?
What do you think?
Maybe it was weekend. We had a lot of fun in Wales, but we only did Cardiff there. We do still obviously have to go back for Snowdonia.
Went to Hastings after that for another dog sit for that same dog.
Over Halloween.
Yeah.
we do this for holidays.
We got 3 trick-or-treaters. It was perfect.
Which is much better than we did in New York City. Where we had 0.
Right. We've never gotten any trick-or-treaters until then.
We went to Bristol and actually saw a friend.
That brings us all the way to November. I think one of the cool things about Bristol is Banksy is from there. So walking around Bristol, you can see a bunch of the earlier Banksys.
I have a walking tour that you could find online, and we saw 5 different Banksy pieces. My favorite was the one based on the girl with pearl earring.
We went duck pin bowling for the first time, which is incredibly difficult. So much harder than regular bowling.
Yeah, the shape of the pin. Who knew how much it would change the game?
And the ball is small too. So the pins are harder to knock down. The ball is smaller and lighter, so you don't get as much like movement. Yeah, it was a lot of fun though.
I went on a few day trips with our friend who finally visited. It was a lovely trip.
I was working.
Yeah. We could always go back because I actually really enjoyed Salisbury and Castle Coombe. Salisbury is known for a huge cathedral. It's beautiful architecture. And Castle Coombe is the chocolate box village that everybody sees images of when you think of the Cotswolds.
Very picturesque.
Went to Athens. We chose this because Sean's parents wanted to go somewhere other than the UK.
Athens was really cool. Greece in general, very cool. You don't flush the toilet paper there.
That was something to get used to. It's definitely had the most differences from everywhere else we've been. Culturally, with business practices, we had experience with that, which was when we went to the gym. Originally, the owner wasn't even there.
Yeah, he was on vacation. There were no employees there. It was just members. People are very laid back, business people in Greece, it seems like. One of the members came up and was like, oh, you can just give me the money, and when the owner gets back in a week, he'll give you the receipt. And I'm like, and he's like, oh, wait, you know what? Why don't you just come in and work out? And when the owner gets here, you can back pay. I was like, that sounds like a plan.
That's what we ended up doing.
Right. And he actually charged us less.
I did actually really enjoy that gym, though. I like the gyms that aren't cookie cutter kind of gyms.
Yeah, it was clearly like an apartment that had been turned into a gym. It was very packed, like everything's close together, and the equipment was interesting.
Pieced together.
Yeah, it was eclectic equipment. 3 Smith machines in 1 squat rack. Very strange.
The biggest thing I noted, other than some machines like that, is the dumbbells. Usually it would like be built into the weight, but instead just like plates were welded on to the handle.
The big thing about Athens was we got to spend 2 weeks with my parents, which was very nice. A crazy amount of history there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of mythological stuff, obviously, which was very cool because we've both been interested in Greek mythology for a long time. So it was cool getting to see some temples and things like that, and then the Parthenon and the Acropolis.
So many archaeological sites that were great to just be in.
And we did day trips like all over Greece because my parents had rented a car. And, my mom knows how to drive, which is different for us. I mean, I think my favorite day trip was probably either Delphi or Meteora.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Delphi was just really cool because obviously it's very tied into the mythology with the oracle and stuff like that.
And Meteora was amazing.
Meteora was just a nice combination of like the historical monasteries and then these just crazy, like naturally formed cliffs that were like very strange looking but very cool. We actually flew back when we dog sat that same dog for that dog's parents.
Over Christmas and New Year's. So we're already like, this is the end of the year.
To continue it, we've been in Canterbury, which will probably have its own video coming up. And that brings us to a full year of nomading. And we plan on doing it for another year at least, because it's been a great time. We have a list and we want to finish that list. We haven't even been to Northern Ireland yet. So.
Yeah, so things that we're looking forward to for this year include finally getting to Northern Ireland, like Belfast and Derry, and Giant's Causeway is the big thing in Northern Ireland that we've been talking about. Like we do want to do a couple of the other high peaks. Yep. So those will probably just be long weekends.
Weekend trips or something, yeah.
We still have to go to Cornwall.
Got to go to Cornwall to get some Kellys. But, I mean, what we really learned over this year was that we can be very flexible with our living situation. We can basically spend a month in pretty much anywhere. And that we really like long walks. Yeah. Like, we knew that we liked day walks, but we now know that we like trekking as well, so. Yeah,
we are thinking of doing another trek possibly this year. Maybe the El Camino, at least part of it.
The Camino de Santiago. If you're doing at least the last 100 kilometers, you can sign up as like a pilgrim and stay in the pilgrimages, is I think the more traditional way to do it. Yeah. So I think that would be pretty cool.
And I mean, I'm just super grateful that like we've been able to live this way, and I'm glad that we're continuing it.